This is, thanks, Jacqueline. So Eric Lagome has agreed to co-host with me in a session that will talk just a little bit about finding a niche, or how you find a niche. And in other words, how do you find the area that you're going to focus your time on, and why should you even bother doing that? We all kind of grew up hearing that emergency medicine, you're a jack of all trades, a master of none, which I've never accepted, and it's always annoyed me to no end. And so my thesis is you have to be a master of something, especially if you're going to be a resource in your department and for your hospital. And I don't care if that's in the community or in an academic center, but you have to be the go-to person, I think, to be a successful member of the hospital or healthcare facility that you're at. So that's kind of the theme here. This is a series 2. You know, we're in our second year of doing our faculty development series. Jacqueline's been recording them for us, and working with Joni has been putting them up on the web for people to listen to. So it becomes kind of a resource for all of our faculty, and especially our new faculty. I think we have something like 20 new faculty joining us, even more come July. So hopefully we're going to be back on a good footing soon. So I'm going to, I have just a few slides that Eric and I will work off of, but then hopefully we'll have a discussion if there is interest in a discussion on all of this. And so what we really want to try and establish is, of course, what's a niche? And a niche is an area of interest and of expertise. It's the thing that you're known for, and everyone's got to have a thing. And the challenge that some of us have at different parts in our careers is how do I find a niche? Where do I find a niche? What if I just don't know what I want to focus on? And that's the question that we want to have that open discussion with, because it's not a question of where or how. It's really the question of how do you do it? I mean, because you don't have a choice, but have to find an area that you're going to master. And then, as a joke, that's not a joke, how much does it cost? Because if you're going to master something, that means you're going to invest time and energy in doing it. But there's a good payoff. So I use that line as an intro for next month's session. And we have Keith Getze, who's going to be joining us. And Keith is an emergency physician who then went to Wharton and got his MBA. And he's been a healthcare consultant. And he speaks at ASAP on a regular basis on financial security in life. And he gives a great talk. So we'll be talking about financial security. And we're going to play off of the investment in stocks and bonds off of the investment of today's topic, which is finding your niche. Because through your niche and the expertise that you establish and get known for, things come your way. And many of those things that come your way pay. And so actually having a niche is an investment academically, professionally, and also it's a currency that you'll use for your financial health, if you're with me. For example, like sometimes people will ask, well, why do you get so many cases to review? Why medical legal cases to review? And I'll tell you, I have a niche and I'm known for that niche. And as a result, things come my way. But I didn't just overnight establish a certain expertise or presence in neurologic emergencies. It took time, but that investment, I have to say, has a financial benefit. Eric, some thoughts?
Yeah, so I'm going to look at number two. Where do I find it? So I agree with everything you said, as always.
That's good.
But I think where do you find it's a really important question, and I think it's really important as you start out. And I kind of look at it. There's about three or four different ways, and I think one way is you find something that just irritates the hell out of you, and you decide that you have to fix it. So whether it is how something is run in the department, or when you have a fellow who comes down and tells you, you need to do it this way, and this is how we do it in cardiology, and you're like, I know that's wrong, but I just don't have that expertise to fight back enough. Or just something that you've decided that there has to be a different solution, and the way we do it is wrong. And so that's one great way to do it. The other way, and sometimes they're the same thing, is you have a passion for something. You just love it. When you see a patient, a trauma patient, you love doing that. That's a great way to develop a niche. So figuring that's where I'm going to develop my expertise, because the more you do, the more people are going to come to you, the more people are going to ask you. And as I said, the possibilities are really, they're endless. I think the opportunities come, and they also are easier, because the more you do in one thing, everything is just relatively easy to do. I got called about 2 weeks ago to give a talk at SAM to sit on a panel, just because they know I've done a lot of work in trauma. And the reality is they sent me some of the questions, and I've already done talks on these questions. So there's no work to do, just basically show up. So, find something you like, spend a lot of time in it, and we'll talk a little more. But I think, that area that you think is you're passionate about, that's a great way to do it. The third way, which I think is probably the worst way, unless it dovetails with the first two ways, is you've decided that not many people do it, and you're going to use it just to get ahead. Because I think it is important to have a niche, and that's how you get ahead. But if you do something because no one else is doing it, or it's needed, but you don't have that passion, you're not dying to fix it, it does work, but it's not a great long-term sustainment. And that may be also, there's a financial benefit, but if you don't love it, I think that it's a great start, but it definitely is not a great career move. But I think those to me are the best ways to do it. What I do find, though, for new attending sometimes, is there's about 5 things they love, or there's 5 things they decided they need to fix. And we'll talk, I think, a little more about this, but I think that is in some ways can be a little dangerous. You can't do everything, and you can't develop a niche in 5 different areas. There's just not enough time in the day and not enough money to support it. So I think you really have to narrow it down, and it may take a year to do that, but you got to do it before 3 or 4 years down the line, or you've really kind of burned the first couple years where that niche you really want to develop.
Yeah, the other way is, of course, someone just assigning you that this is going to be your niche, shut up and do it. And that doesn't often work unless somebody is very flexible. So we've tried in our department, those of you like Vishali, been around for a while, know that we've tried in the past, and we still do have a liaison program, for example. So the liaison between emergency medicine and cardiology, you would think that liaison would take on cardiac issues and be the departmental lead in all that's cardiac, including the resident curriculum in cardiac. And it's the same with GI, it's the same with wound management. I have to tell you, at MSH, maybe it's different downtown or over on the west side, but at MSH, we haven't just been that successful. For example, and Jonathan and Vishali, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not really sure who my cardiology go-to is. Luke Herman, when he was with us, took on OBS with a cardiac chest pain edge, and he really did become involved nationally. It was his area. He joined SAM interest group. He joined ASAP clinical policies, and he just hammered away at cardiac. I don't know who that person is. Our wound management approach at Sinai, at MSH, I think it's a mess. I don't think we have a lot of the state-of-the-art wound management tools. Who's our wound management leader? it's a niche, and it's a niche that just interfaces you with every other department, with the residents, with the medical students. It's just endless, the opportunities. Who's the GI person, right? Who loves GI emergencies?
So
Who goes to the table with GI and really advocates with knowledge? Because Ron Walls once said something that just resonated to me. And he said, there's only one literature. It's not like GI or cardiology or neurology, which I've learned over and over. It's not like they have a magic literature, right? I mean, there's one literature, and if you master it, you're an equal at the table.
I would argue, well, not argue, I would
Argue, go try it.
I'm not arguing, I'm agreeing, is that there's a big difference also in your niche. And when you talk about developing a niche, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to define your entire career. So I look at, there's different levels. So let's take Jeff Glassberg. He has developed a niche in sickle cell, and he really is a international expert in that. And he has gone to a totally different level. But on the other hand, we have people, Andy, we just talked about Christopher Verte. He is a clinical physician at our site who he's not a core faculty, but he was interested in concussion. He's part of the NFL group that we work at. He wrote the chapter for Rosen's. He's given lectures on this. And if I have a question on concussion, or I'm looking to do a study, or I want to, if someone comes to me and says, I have a paid position that I'm looking for someone that has expertise, he's the person I'm going to go to. So that level of what you're going to do, it could be that you have interest in it and you have to develop something around it, which we'll talk about, but you do not have to be a researcher. You do not have to be funded. You do not have to go to a fellowship, but you do have to put time and energy into it in some way, shape, or form and have a product around it. But that being said, that could be very, very different from it's a huge continuum.
So Trevor, I'm going to put you on the spot, so you can unmute if you want. You can even put your video on. But I have a question for you. Are you ready?
I'm here. What's up?
Okay. So do you think you can really be core faculty and not have a niche?
Yes, but you're not going to do fun things as a core faculty member. There's administrative stuff that we need help with, and I have a feeling you get tasked with those kind of things. So it allows you to it allows you to do things that you enjoy with the residents.
Okay. And Chris, I'll ask you a question, Strother, if you're up for it. I don't know if you're. Are you on?
Sure, I'm here.
Yeah. So you end up developing a niche in SIM. What made you develop that niche?
A combination of opportunity. I was, invited to help with it at one point. I was looking for teaching opportunities, and this one came up. For it, like once I found the opportunity to do it, pursued more of it, and it allowed me to build more of it, rather than just sort of doing what was already there, because I enjoyed it and it was rewarding. It allowed me to build more, which then led to larger groups. Right. The nice thing about that niche is it really built my network outside the department as well, because it allows you to interact with the simulation community and other departments that do simulation and those sorts of things. So it really creates that academic network. So I think it was really just fell in the interest of teaching. An opportunity landed there. I was invited to be the PEDS sim guy when I started with Haru Okuda way back in the day. But because it was enjoyable and allowed me to meet new people and do things, I continued to build on it and expanded outside of just the departmental work.
Yeah, Elaine, I didn't actually see that you were on, and I don't know if you feel up for also commenting about core faculty with a niche, and how critical is it that in order to be core, you have a defined niche.
I think it's the general expectation of academic faculty at this point everywhere. I agree with Trevor. I mean, everybody does some administrative work and has to in their job one way or another. But the fun parts tend to be the parts that you do because of your niche, I think.
Right. So
That being said, medical education can be a niche. So by being core faculty, you can serve in various roles that kind of make that an area of expertise in and of itself.
Can you actually, let's go back to that, because I think that's a really important thing. And so I will tell you that we interview people all the time. And when you ask them, what do you want to do? And they said, I love education. I want to teach. And the first thing I generally tend to ask is, well, tell me about, what theories do you use? Tell me about the methodology. How have you studied it? What innovations have you done? So I think you're absolutely right. Medical education is an absolute niche. But there's a very, very big difference of I like to teach and I give lectures versus I understand medical education. And I think that's an important thing for people who are new in medical education, whether it's part of a residency, working with medical students, is actually understanding what medical education means. And I think, Chris, you also have done a lot of work in simulation in medical education, and there's a real big difference. And I think, the other piece around a niche is it's not just what you like, it really depends on, what you're doing in your career, where you get hired. And when you talk about you like to teach, but you don't truly understand medical education, to me, that's not a niche, that's a like, or something you like doing, but you haven't developed or put the time into it.
So Eric, let me ask you, do you think it's a chair's failure if they have a faculty that hasn't developed a niche? Or do you think it's the faculty's failure? Or do you think it's combined failure? I
think it's combined failure. So I think, for our job, part of our job is when we meet with, so when I meet with the core faculty, we send out a core faculty sheet every year. And we ask, what is your role in the residency and how does that fit kind of into your career? And the expectation is that I am the something person. And then it's followed by what have you done around this? So whether it is curriculum design, and over time, our attempt is to kind of match those things up. So if I'm the trauma person in the residency, what does that mean? Does that mean you're the liaison? Does that mean that you're actually developing policies? Where's your expertise in trauma? Are you writing about it? Are you speaking about it? And over a period of time, that needs to be a niche. If 5 years into this or 3 years into this, all you are is that you're the person who gives a lecture once in a while and talks about it, I think it's time for someone else. And then I would argue with any piece, if you are, because I think the residents deserve expertise. If we're holding ourselves out as a world-class institution with world-class teachers, those teachers can't be people who just like it. So I think liking it, that passion, the desire for change is the entry. But to reach a true niche, and I think you have a slide on it, there's 50 different things you could do, from fellowship to writing to giving talks, but it's a combination of things that build you. And that it leads to, as Chris talked, it leads to that network, it leads to more opportunities. And some of those opportunities may ultimately end up being a financial opportunity. The vast majority are just more of your time. But when you have that passion, it's fun. You enjoy it, and it leads to some great interactions with people, travel, writing, and so it is a critical part of developing an academic career. But I would argue, and I think you said, as a non-academic career, if you're a community physician chair interviewing, and someone, it's hard to tell if someone is a good doctor or not, but if they've been on 5 committees and really know a lot about something, you automatically add to your site. So I think there's a real role for a niche that's not just in academics, that's outside academics also.
And I think this is a message we've tried to get across to our senior residents, and why we emphasize so much in the senior year, whether it's a 3-year or 4-year program, that involvement that demonstrates willingness to be involved and ability to deliver. Does anybody out on the call, because we're a small group, have any reflection on either how they found a niche or why you haven't found a niche? Does anybody have any comments that you'd like to add?
Dr. Jagoda, can I jump in on the second half of that question that you just asked? This is Ryan O'Halloran. How are you?
Yeah.
on the why you maybe haven't found a niche question. I wonder how you and Dr. Leom feel about, when you're junior faculty, you join a great group of people, and the niche that you think that you want or the stuff that you're most passionate about already exists as someone else in the group's niche. And how you either sort of not jump on the bandwagon, but hitch on to something and then continue to work closely with that person? Or do you think that effort is better spent finding something different, something that the group needs? So I imagine within the Sinai faculty, it would be tough for someone to come in and be the new neuro guru following you, Dr. Jagoda. But you mentioned that, that there's not somebody necessarily interested in cardiology. Now, if somebody came into the faculty and their passion was neuro, do you think it's worth them to become your protege and become the next Dr. Jagoda? Or do you think it's worth branching into cardiology and focusing on that instead?
Yeah, without any question in my mind, there is so much opportunity in any one niche for divide and conquer and to collaborate. And you can actually be that much more productive with a colleague that you're collaborating with. And so in neurology, whether you want seizures or epileptic seizures or stroke or headache, it's so big and so vast. And there's so much opportunity there that if you should follow what you're interested in doing, and you'll make your opportunities.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'd be both shocked and disappointed if someone had a niche and you came to them and said, I really want to get involved. And they said, no, this is my deal. You got to find something else. That goes against, I think, everything in academics what we should be doing. Because part of also having a niche is mentorship clearly fits into that, and networking fits into it. And the more you have working on it, there almost always is multiple areas within an area. So whether it's trauma, neurology, cardiology, you can dividing and conquering. There's always enough for 2 people or 3 people. So I would say absolutely don't be dissuaded if someone already has expertise. That in many ways that's a way to get where you want much faster.
So let me ask Ugo and Deb. Each of you run a excellent community practice, and is there a need for your faculties to have a niche to liaison and be the lead on the emergency side of disease management? And how do you do? Is that something you prioritize in your faculties?
It's absolutely necessary. I'll just say, after COVID, I think everybody got a nice little pass for all of this. But one of the things I'm trying to do now is make sure that everyone is finding that clinical area where they want to make a contribution to the department. And there's so many things going on in the service line level as well. So actually, I just responded to a text where one of the docs asked about ED radiology, for example, an ED lab, where we're really working on improving the process in the hospital. And now there are meetings with the system leadership. So there's that transparency and accountability for the hospitals to the system. And so, yes, I want every one of my docs engaged and connected to whatever that is that they have an interest in. And I think, Ryan, you were just saying, you may see other people doing something and you're interested in it. Maybe you don't know what it is you want to do, but I think just jumping in and finding something that is interesting to you is something you want to fix. Certainly fixing the lab situation, fixing the turnaround times for CAT scans, that tends to irk everybody off, like especially at night. I mean, that's something that we want to fix. So having someone start there, jump into that and fix that is a way to see, where that leads.
And so guys, I am driving, so just in case you hear background noise, and that's why my camera is off. But I couldn't agree more with Deb. I think that you have to understand that community medicine 75%, at least that's the statistics from a few years ago, of emergency departments across the nation are community sites. And a lot of the work that comes out and what we do come out from community sites. And so there's always a need. Am I breaking up? Hope you still hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. So yeah, so there's always a need for administration on operations, like Deb just mentioned about how to make things better. But there are actually new and unique evolving needs, like the social determinants of health that is coming up, and sort of when we talk about equity in medicine, that really are niches one can fill, and that could really benefit medicine, emergency medicine as a whole. So just like Deb in my department, I think every faculty member has a role that they play. And yes, some of them come in not knowing what they do, but eventually they may get either assigned one, or I really try to push them to actually sort of come up with something that could satisfy a need in the department. And it is important for community sites to do likewise. And I think for most of you who end up going and working in community sites, you'll see that there is always a need for expertise in whichever little field or area that you want to practice in.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing, and it's two parts. So this third bullet says, how much does it cost? And I've already said, it costs. There needs to be an investment up front. So you can't just decide, I'm going to be the lab person without investing actually a fair amount of time in understanding the laboratory tests themselves, and also the operational issues in getting the test done. But I would say, if I'm hearing Eric and Deb and Ugo correctly, that you're more likely to be hired, whether it's as coming out of residency or mid-career, if you're bringing something to the table, which means you've established a niche. And so the real message here, back again to investing in the future, your future, part of the return is having a niche that you've really mastered in some way. It's interesting, and look, it isn't to say you can do just fine without a niche, and we know many people who have, but it's a different just fine. And if we look at what happened right at COVID, a lot of people lost their jobs. There were a lot of emergency physicians who were unable to find a job, right? And the projection is 10 years from now that it will be even a tighter job market. Who's going to get the job? And that's someone who has added value, because the assumption is that someone who's residency trained is clinically good. That's the assumption. But what else? So this is why, look, the whole beauty, I think, of our system, and I'm kind of a cheerleader because I believe in what we are as a system, is we're at Mount Sinai because it gives us a lot of opportunity. It's very important, especially having Ugo and Deb on the phone and everybody else, that we have opportunities for diversified practice. And whether it's an academic practice or a community practice, there's still a need for masters with real expertise. All that said, throughout our system, our 8 hospitals or 9 hospitals, depending on what day we're talking about, there are just tremendous opportunities clinically with lots of needs. So, we've established a whole division of operations. And if that's somebody's area, then they should be actively involved in building that expertise. And then, of course, we have all of our scholarly work, our academic work. But the difference that I want to emphasize is having the opportunity is what ends up opening doors for all of us. So it's something that everyone should be thinking how to take advantage of it, which brings us back in a circuitous way. You take advantage of it by developing an area of expertise, and that's the beginning. So Eric used Reverte as an example. I love Chris. He did like an amazing job writing a book chapter on concussion, a masterful book chapter, by the way. He really did dive into the literature and analyzed it exceptionally well. He got involved in the neurotrauma work that we do with the NFL. This is beautiful. the question, and if Chris was on the phone, I would ask him, but what's next? Because once we develop and I don't know, I'm not saying that to be cute. I don't know what's next, but the point is there has to be what's next, especially in our world. So how do I maintain the momentum? And that's key. I invest all this time and energy in developing an area of expertise. I write my first review. Maybe I turn that into 3 or 4 reviews, which a good writer would do. And then what's the next question?
I think, in many ways that first step is the hardest, identifying your area. And, it is a cost because no one is paying you to do it. No one's going to give you time to do it. But I would argue that, when people come to me and say, this is my interest, it's, show me what you can do. Here's 5 ideas. Here's the right people to talk to. I can help you with this, but you got to put in the time. And once you have that initial thing done, so, for Chris, his niche may be concussion, and he will continue to do lectures on it. He has some scholarship around it, and he decides, what, I want to be a clinician, and that's my major goal. And I would say that is still okay because you are still known, you have expertise. And the reality is any subsequent chapter he does, lecture he does, it just isn't that hard because he has that knowledge. He may decide, what, I really want to get more involved and I want to do less clinical work. And let me talk with Andy because he's involved with a lot of the neurotrauma studies. How do I start getting involved in them? How do I get some funding? So I think, once you put that initial work in and decide that's what you like, then those opportunities become much more prevalent and much easier to get, and you have that name. I could talk about, another one of my clinical person, Bonnie Brown. She's EMIM. She came in to run the retos at one site, then did a great job, was offered the other site. And then she got in, she really enjoyed the cardiology piece of it. So she started, giving lectures on it. She just wrote, I had an opportunity to give someone something from ACEP that she just wrote this entire monograph, and she's doing a slideshow for ACEP for their MOC. She's giving a talk at Andy's conference. She is now a local expert in low risk chest pain in the emergency department. So, as I said, you don't have to do a fellowship. You just have to have the interest, the willingness to put the time in, and more things come. And then how you parlay that into either time, money, or more expertise and more of your own time really depends on what it is you're doing and how much you like it and what are the opportunities. But you have to put that initial time in, and the opportunities just come out of the woodwork.
Yeah, no, that's well put. And so I'll keep reminding again as the cheerleader, as we all start developing these areas of expertise, we have the resources that are needed. Unlike, I don't know, times in the past, we've actually built a certain platform that helps us. I mean, we have our students. So there's anybody who wants to give a lecture to medical students or residents. I mean, we should ask Elaine and Chen, do they have problems finding faculty to give talks? I kind of know the answer. We have a fairly good research infrastructure at this point. We have lots of operational needs. I mean, anybody interested in ED operations, we have 8 hospitals with a division at the system level dedicated to operations. So that is all great. But on the right-hand side is the converse. And these are the things that are valid and often come up in discussions when you meet with Eric or Brendan or Yvette or Deb or Ugo, which is basically, I need office space, though most of us are used to working at home at this point. It would be great to have someone support me a little bit, but we do have some fairly good virtual support these days. And then here's the last 2 things, the protected time and the money. I would like to develop a niche, but it takes a lot of time, and I could make more money doing a few moonlighting shifts instead of investing in building that area of expertise. That's not the focus of today's session, but it is a mentality that I don't think leads to career success. And that's open for discussion and open for debate, and will be a focus for next month's session. And so I don't think we need to spend a lot of time, but I would like to just come to this slide, but not until I ask Eric, what kind of advice did Peter Rosen give you in the past about developing a niche and what faculty should do?
That's a great question. So when I started out, I'll give you a little background. So when I started out in my career, my first job was at Mass General, which was a wonderful place, but we had a chair who was a surgeon, a vice chair who trained in GI, actually, I think emergency medicine, and then your GI. We had all pretty much, they had just hired all emergency medicine trained physicians, but there was literally no senior level faculty in emergency medicine. Ron Walls was there, but he was over at the Brigham. And there was a lot of resources, but really no guidance. No one knew what they were doing. And so I spent my first couple of years saying yes to everything. And as I mentioned before, I was really interested in a lot of things. And I lived it. I spent my, I probably worked 70 hours a week. I loved it. But I was doing lectures on hand trauma. I was doing lectures on trauma. I was doing lectures on and writing on back pain. I was doing stuff on education. I was the co-director of the medical students, and then I was the associate residency director. And somewhere about my third year there, so they decided to bring Peter Rosen in and said, look, we want to bring in a senior emergency medicine physician who is well-known, and you're going to all meet with him, and he's going to give you advice on how to develop your career. And so we, put our CVs together. I met with him, and I don't know if anybody knows Peter or knew Peter. He died, but knew Peter. I got to know him very well over the years, and it was his classic Peter. He looked at my CV and said, "What the fuck is this?" Which is exactly how he used to talk. But he basically said, you are wasting your time, and it's not that you're doing bad things, but you will never ever develop your career doing this. You're doing 15 different things. You're all over the place. You're doing everything yourself. And, you're working with medical students, you're working with residents. Why aren't they on your papers? Why aren't you using them to help you? And it's not that you're using them, you're developing their career too. Why are you doing a lecture on this and then 2 other lectures on this and then flying over here to do this? This is not a career building exercise. And, went through it and said, stop this, stop this, stop this. And I really kind of started focusing on 1 or 2 things. And, I ended up spending a lot of my academic career in trauma. And I've now written 3 or 4 books and multiple papers. And it's really, become something, and it was a passion of mine. And I stopped doing, back pain's interesting, but it's not that interesting. And hand injuries are interesting, but they're not that interesting. And, I got into what I like doing. And I think that was, just incredible advice that I wish someone gave me 3 years prior when before I did all that. So I think that mentorship's a big piece of it, but really focusing on what it is you're going to focus on, staying with that, and then developing your base your first couple of years out. And that base will make everything easier because you know the literature, you know the people, you have a network. And then everything afterwards is, you asked to write a chapter, you're writing something for Up to Date, you're writing for EV Medicine, you're putting a grant in. It's all easy because you know what to write already. You know where the people are. You know what you're doing. You ask Andy to give a lecture on concussion. He could do it off the top of his head. He knows the literature. He keeps up. You read a few papers every year because you know everything else. So I think that first couple of years is critical, but that focus is really, really critical to not go all over the place.
Yeah, I think so. That's pretty well said. And this slide that's up is just simply the reminder that if you can identify that area you're going to focus in, and you can change, just like Eric said, you're not stuck in any one area, but you got to choose an area, and then you need to begin building your fund of knowledge. And the best way then of consolidating your fund of knowledge is, of course, writing. And there isn't anyone in our department who can't get involved in writing a review if they want to. If they just contact me, there is no shortage of opportunities and innovative ideas of how you can disseminate all this knowledge you've mastered. But it's something that's got to be done for a couple reasons. One, if you're in an academic site, you need to have the productivity. And two, if, of course, you hope to move forward and be promoted, you need to show that quantifiable involvement. And it doesn't have to be in a peer-reviewed journal per se. It can be through social media for that matter, but it's got to be good and it's got to be widely disseminated. And I think that's part of the take home. I mean, we can keep hammering away at the concept. What I think Eric and I really wanted to accomplish in these 45 minutes is just get people thinking a little bit about what is their niche and how are they working it and how are they developing it and how are they taking it to the next level or maybe exploring yet another niche. If somebody doesn't know what their niche is, then they need to sit with their division lead. So if you're a toxicologist, you should be sitting down with Manini or Jonathan Schimmel or and kind of talking about how can I now take my interest and do X, right? And this is the way to move forward and contribute to your own professional growth, but also to contribute to the department. And so again, what Eric and I wanted to do is get people thinking really seriously, what's their niche? How are they going to work it? And if they need help, come see me or see Eric or see Lynn or see Brendan or whoever you feel comfortable sitting down with and kind of discussing. It's getting started. That's oftentimes the hardest part. And then when you get momentum, it flies.
Yeah. And it is hard, but I can tell you there are attendings who I've met with and they said, I need some help. And we talked through kind of what their interests are. And, 2 years later, they are on a really great path. And there's others that they walk out of the office unbelievably motivated. And then the next year you have the exact same discussion and there's no difference. And it's a real, you have to put that time in, take that motivation. And once you get started, it just gets easier. But that first step is hard.
Anybody have any comments or anything that you would like to kind of go off on a tangent on?
I'm just going to chime in here. I'm still driving, but I just want to put it out there. Do plan around your life. I know it's sometimes difficult and we don't talk about it because we want to do 70 hours a week. Most of you, if you're planning on having families, put that plan in paper so you understand what it's going to take you to get from one point to the next. For the scholarship involved, for you to be able to put out a ton of scholarship like Eric and Andy Jagoda, it does take a lot of effort. And so if you're having family discussions with the family, make sure you put that on the table and be clear about it with everybody involved so you know what you're up against.
Yeah, I'm smiling, Ugo, because when my wife was a neurology resident, the residency director turned to one of her colleagues who was pregnant and said, it would help the department plan if you would schedule a C-section. Yeah, I think the way we plan is a lot different nowadays than 40 years ago.
Yeah, no, not 40 years ago. Well, I agree, and yeah, I agree to an extent. I do think, look, 70 hours is clearly not for everyone, but I also think that it's really, really hard to get ahead in your career without at some point putting in an extra time. And it pays off down the line because that time ultimately will come back in multiple different ways, whether it's a different or better job, whether it's more opportunities, whether it's more pay in some way, shape, or form. But I agree. You got to take stock of your life. You have to understand what is doable, and a written plan in some way, shape, or form goes a long way in giving yourself guidance. So I agree with that. and you know, the reality is that you may decide you want to have an R01 and be a researcher, but you have 4 kids at home under 5 years old, and it may not happen. So I think you're right. You need to take stock of what's realistic. But I also think for everyone, you have to develop some level of expertise, or else it becomes a very long career without that.
Right, I was going to add that because I think, Andy, that's one thing you told me many years ago. It's like, Deb, you know, you want to develop so that, you know, you have some passion about something. You don't want to just go to work and then go home every day. You want to make sure that you're always developing yourself, growing. And I guess the take home from this, I mean, these are incredible pearls, is make sure that you're growing in a specific direction so that it's cumulative over the course of your career, and it'll pay off.
That's right.
Mhm.
All right, last chance, Mark, Andre from Pittsburgh. I'm so glad to see that you joined us. We can't wait to see what your niche is going to be.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to come back.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got the kids this afternoon too, but this has been great.
I can't wait. I can't wait to hold the kids in person.
Yeah, we're doing great here. I'll see you soon.
We can't wait. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. A recording of this will be online by the end of the week. And next month, I promise to do a better job disseminating the Zoom link.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Eric Lagome.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it. It's great to be here and see everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.